Good morning, John. So your video this week about how we should handle professional provocateurs and how we still, as a society, have no idea how to do it reminded me mostly how glad I am that I have no desire to be a professional provocateur, because I think I actually would be pretty good at it. I just think I'm not built for it. And it's a good way to get views. It's a good way to build a loyal audience. It's just a terrible way to build a better world or be like a happy person. I remember watching this happen as like being a YouTuber started to be a more like culturally desirable thing. A bunch of our colleagues, like new ones and existing ones, started down that path because it was just a great way to get views. And it still is. And don't let me convince you that I don't sometimes enjoy getting views. I just also really dislike being disliked, which is not something we're going to get into in this video. And your video also made me think about a thing that I once heard Jeff Bezos say. And this is risky because like uttering the words Jeff Bezos is a great way to become a professional provocateur. Like dunking on Jeff Bezos is neither difficult nor brave. It's like one of the infinite points glitches of online discourse. But I got to an interesting spot when I was thinking about this thing that Jeff Bezos said, so I want to walk down the path. I also did go and watch the full context of the clip to make sure I wasn't missing anything important. I wasn't, so here's the clip. It's very short.
I would love to see, a trillion humans living in the solar system. If we had a trillion humans, we would have, at any given time, 1,000 Mozarts and 1,000 Einsteins.
I did not watch this whole interview, by the way. I was just served this clip by an algorithm. Of course, because the algorithm would love me to see things that make me annoyed. And there's one way in which I am annoyed for, I think, pretty obvious reasons, and one way in which I am annoyed by this clip for less obvious reasons. And we're going to start with the more obvious thing. So the claim here, that goes unquestioned, is if there were a trillion humans, there would be 1,000 Mozarts. But is that how it works? And Mozart is an interesting example. When Mozart was born, there were around 800 million people on Earth. So if there were a trillion people, then we would get actually 1,250 Mozarts. Amazing! Except, of course, there are currently 8 billion people on Earth, so there should be, according to the math, 10 Mozarts already. And perhaps there are. There's, Stevie Wonder and David Byrne and Jacob Collier and Beyonce and Bjork. Perhaps they're all Mozarts. But of course, in another way, there are very obviously like no Mozarts. Like Mozart was a particular guy with his own vibe. Restart the universe, run it again, you're gonna get a single Mozart every time. Or none. I don't know how quantum mechanics works. But I think importantly, Mozart could also very easily have not been Mozart. It is worth remembering that Mozart's father was not just a world-class musician, but a world-class music teacher who basically retired to spend all of his time instructing his child in both his education generally and his music education. Mozart was raised in a household filled with world-class musical instruments that were, at the time, new technology. I think a lot about Renaissance Italy. So in 1500, there were a lot of canon creators of Renaissance masterworks working in Italy. And you can't even really say that Renaissance Italy was particularly optimized for locating talent. The pipeline for participation in any of these intellectual and artistic pursuits was largely unavailable to half the population who weren't men, but then even getting access to the patrons and the workshops and the education, all of this stuff, apprenticeships, that of course was also not available to the vast majority of the men who were largely doing manual labor producing food and textiles. And yet, Machiavelli, Botticelli, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael were all working at the same time in Florence, which was a city with barely 60,000 people. Nobody thinks that a magical, mystical, super art juice got dumped in the water when these people were born. Nobody thinks that there's some magical genetic difference between these people and the people a few generations before them, or the people toiling in the countryside. This is probably altogether too much talking to say something that pretty much every historian on Earth has long agreed with. Mozart's existence was not contingent upon the world waiting for the soul of Mozart to be created or the genetics of Mozart to be created. Mozart's existence was contingent upon the circumstances that Mozart was born into, the household, the family, the father, but also the technologies and the many shoulders that he stood metaphorically upon. None of which is to say that Mozart was not a genius, or that he wasn't hardworking, or a crazy weirdo who was very, very specifically himself. He was all those things, but the best way to get more Mozarts is not to get more people. I mean, largely because you don't get more Mozarts. You get one Mozart because these are people. And maybe this isn't quite what Jeff was saying. Like, maybe he's saying, look, with more people, there would be more genius. There would be more wonderful things being created. And if you combine that with opportunities brought by increasing both like the absolute access to resources and equality, then yeah, you can also get more genius with the same number of people. And I think that we have proven this in the world already by just giving people access to more thriving, by allowing them more opportunity. And I am actually pretty freaked out by the idea that anyone, let alone like super powerful people, think that genius is a math equation where the primary variable you should be messing with is population size. That's very obviously wrong and also kind of scary because it indicates that you believe that Da Vinci would have been able to be Da Vinci even if his father didn't like work for a guy who was running one of the most renowned workshops in Florence. Da Vinci? Nepo baby? No, but like without that connection, there would probably be like a Ninja Turtle named Brunelleschi or something awful. I guess Brunelleschi was his last name. What was his first name? Donato? Filippo. Who was Donato? There was a Donato, wasn't there? The footballer. Right, of course. Bramante. Donato Bramante. So that's the obvious thing. But then there's the less obvious thing that I was more annoyed by, and it's not because I disagree with Jeff. I do. But also because despite working on it, I still often get stuck in this frame. Because when Jeff was thinking about the advantage of having more people, he was thinking about the potential for there to be more like genius, more like canonized, celebrated creations, rather than just more people living happy lives. I get stuck there so much. I think that this is my nature. I think it is to some extent human nature, but I get stuck there so much. And it is to the detriment of my own happiness. So there's an argument in philosophy, from what I understand. I don't understand much about philosophy, but there are philosophers who say that it is a fundamental good to have more people because if 1 million humans thriving is good, and I think it is, then 1 billion humans thriving would be 1,000 times more good. And I'm not like 100% on board with this. Like it seems to me like there's an okay chance that 1 million humans thriving is good, not because it's thriving times 1 million, but because those are people who exist and they are thriving rather than suffering. But whether we should care more about the absolute amount of thriving in the universe or just the thriving of the beings that actually exist, I cannot tell you. Though I hope that philosophers can at least agree that it's an open question. But it does not seem to me that philosophers are out there thinking that it's best to optimize for some like imagined, permanent, canonized genius than it is to optimize for increasing happiness and decreasing suffering. But Jeff Bezos in this clip doesn't frame any of his desire for there to be 1 trillion humans in terms of thriving. Instead, he frames it in terms of the existence of not just genius, but of like recognized canon genius. And I find myself thinking that way too, that the value of my life is not my life, but it is my outputs. And I know I can get free of this. Like it happens to me fairly often where I'm able to get out of that frame, but I also know that I can get stuck in it. That also happens to me a lot. It happens to me so much, and I am so certain that it is wrong that there are like a bunch of Hank Green quotes about this. Like the third most quoted passage from my first book is, "You will always struggle with not feeling productive until you accept that your own joy can be something you produce." And also a bunch of people quoted to me my own words, "Your life is not about getting a frickin' task done. It is about building a you." But the reason I say these things is because I believe them. And I think the reason that they resonate is because other people believe them. But despite the fact that we believe them, we struggle to internalize them. And also it's important to recognize that like striving is good. We make a better world by wanting it. So striving is good. Competition is good. Working hard is good. And these things can be in tension, but I also don't know that they have to be. I think that there's good news here, which is like if we actually optimize for thriving, if we're creating a world that provides for people's wants and needs and is more equal and just, there will be more thriving and there will be more creation. I don't know that it's going to result in more of the kind of like remembered forever canonized genius like Einstein's and Mozart's. I think that that actually isn't about the amount of genius in the world. I think that's more about how cultures remember than it is about reality. But I do think that in a world where more people are given tools and comfort, there will be more thriving and more creation than there would be in a world where most people are like subsistence farmers. Of course, I think that we also need some amount of hunger, like of ambition, of competition to truly optimize creation. But like, I don't see any sign of us not having that. Like, that's not the thing we need to be optimizing for because that's built in. Like, we have plenty of it. The much harder thing is to find for ourselves and provide for others the safety that is so necessary for creativity to emerge. I actually do think that we have more genius now than we did in Mozart's era. I think there's way more beautiful creations being created. I think that, we will not remember them the same way because that's not how we do. But I think there is more genius. I think there's more thriving. I think there's more creativity. And we didn't get more Mozarts by increasing the population. We did increase the population, but we mostly got them by creating the circumstances in which humans thrive. And the inhumanity of imagining genius as like a, well, I guess we just have to roll the dice more kind of problem rather than a like, how do we create a world with more thriving problem, felt like it needed a bit of a response. And not only aimed outward as a dunk, but aimed inward as I know that I struggle with this, and I also know that other people do as well. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.